Starting in verse 3 of chapter 4, in the same way, we also, when we were children, Paul says, were enslaved to the elementary principles of the world. Here's my commentary. We're near the bottom of page 138, moving into page 139. Comments. Notice how Paul switches to the personal pronoun we to intimately identify with his audience. Many commentators, including Tim Hague, feel that Paul is basically describing the Jewish people when he says we. For instance, I say in my commentary that Paul, too, was a son of Abraham according to the flesh, right? Paul was circumcised on the eighth day because his parents did so according to the commandment. He, too, top of page 139, was an heir, yet was treated like a slave until arriving at personal trust in Yeshua, right? Makes sense? So Paul can make sense of this analogy because he was at this point in time. And he's trying to get the Gentiles in his letter to understand that until they place their faith in Messiah, they are basically slaves as well, albeit from a different perspective than, for instance, the Jewish people of Paul's day. Jewish ethnicity was found to be lacking of true covenant membership short of embracing faith in the promised seed. Israel was, to one extent or another, always in slavery, even though she, at the time of Paul's letter, dwelled in the land of her forefathers. Now, if I can use an anachronistic term here, the Zionists of Paul's day, right, those who were strongly in favor of this would be the people who were closer to Jerusalem, right, the Judeans, if I could use that term instead. The Zionists of Paul's day would not easily argue about such slavery, pointing to Rome as their captor. Yet, Paul wanted his readers to come to an even more personal and pertinent realization that outside of personal trust in Yeshua, they were actually slaves to the stoicheon. The stoicheon of the very world around them. Now, here's where we got to get a little technical for a moment. Let me jump down to the footnote of number 135. The stoicheon were, as defined by Thayer's and Smith's Bible Dictionary, right, the TSBD. The stoicheon are defined as, quote, the elements from which all things have come, the material causes of the universe, the heavenly bodies either as parts of the universe or as others think, because in them the elements of man, life, and destiny were supposed to reside, end quote. In fact, the Stoics, right, from which we also get the word stoicheon, the Stoics were those ancient Greek philosophers that the religious Hebrews of Paul's day were attempting to avoiding becoming like by espousing to the Judaism instead of espousing to Greek philosophy. They were trying to distance themselves from the philosophies of the ancient Greeks. And yet, Paul now reveals that outside of the regeneration offered by the Spirit of the Messiah, no matter if you're Jew or Gentile, a person was a legal heir, that is, a slave, to even the baser principles of fallen human nature, complete with all of its ugliness, something that I believe was surely shocking to the candidate of righteousness. So from Paul's perspective, it didn't matter whether you were a Jewish religious person, a Pharisee, a Sadducee, an Essene, no, it didn't matter. If you didn't espouse the faith in God, then even though the outside looked quite clean and perhaps you avoided all of the nonsensical Greek philosophy that permeated the society of that day by walking a different path known as Torah observance. It didn't matter really, because from the inside you were actually still a slave to the stoicheon. In other words, as we're going to read later on in chapter 4, verse 8 through 9, you were actually still slaves to the demons. The god of this world was still controlling you, whether you knew it or not or liked it or not. Understand my point?